Okay. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to learn about three technologies here. CSS is probably the one that we're going to hit the least. It's not quite as, like I said, this course we're mainly worried about being able to do it, not being able to make the prettiest website in the world. And CSS is mostly involved with the prettifying, making something pretty. But we will talk about that. We're going to talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and introduce those three concepts. Because next week, we're going to talk about creating a web map on a page. And to do that, we're going to use some JavaScript. Now, this isn't going to be a course where we write tons and tons of code, but we're going to write some. So we need to learn how to do that. The first one, HTML, is writing code, but it's code that's a little different than programming code. Okay, HTML is actually just the formal way to write information about how you want your things to appear on the page. We've all used word processing before, right? Okay, you've all used Word. When you go highlight some text and make it bold, okay, there's actually the computer is being told, okay, everything from this character to this character, make it bold. And really, HTML isn't any different. Okay, what you're doing is you're writing out the explicit instructions instead of you right-clicking and saying bold. You actually have to say this text here is bold. So I'm going to go to the web page here. It's the W3C schools, and then type in HTML. This is the tutorial that I cited before. Okay, and so in this example that is here, there's some tags. These are called tags, and your tags are placed in your document, and your tags describe the elements that are going to be on the page. So we've got some tags at the top that really don't do much, but they are more for background purposes. So this one right up here just tells it that it's an HTML page, because there are things like CSS and JavaScript pages. This just means it's an HTML page. That'll be in every HTML document that you create. And then the second tag is a tag that says, here's where the HTML starts. And with every tag, you have to close that tag. So here's the opening of the HTML tag, and here's the closing of the HTML tag. Opening, closing, right? Then the next thing that appears is a head tag. The head tag does not appear on the page. This is information about the page, things such as the title, any other metadata. We're not really going to be concerned with much of anything in the head tag. Also, the little icon that appears here, okay, that's something that you would specify in the head tag, okay? But we're not even going to worry about that. I mean, you could do that sometime, figure out how to do that. We're not going to worry about that, okay? All right, so that's the head. So pretty much all this stuff is going to be the same in almost all HTML pages that you make for this class. The only thing you're going to change is this page title. That's what actually appears right here. See that thing that says HTML tutorial? That word page title appears there. All right. Everything from the body on is what you are going to change. The body on is the thing that appears in this portion. See this portion? Okay, the body is where you build the content that you want to show people. Okay. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is, if I hit this try it yourself button, I can see what shows up on the right is the result of the code that's on the left. So if I change the word heading to headings, whoops, I don't know what I did there. If I change headings and I hit run, I could see that it shows up and changes, puts that S over there. Okay. I can change this is a paragraph to this is a paragraph. Isn't that great? And hit run, and it puts it over there. Okay. This is good, but we want to create our own web pages. So one thing I'm going to show you that's not necessarily on the tutorial here, but if I copy and paste this into Notepad, everybody has Notepad on their computer. It's a little more effective. I have this Notepad++ installed on my computer. I think it's installed on the Hattiesburg computers. I like it because it like colorizes things, but it's not necessary. So here's Notepad, and I'm going to copy and paste. So what I did there was I highlighted all this. I right-clicked or pressed Control-C and said copy, and then pasted this into another web browser. I mean, sorry, into Notepad. Okay, so I've pasted it in Notepad. So here it is here it is in Notepad. And now I'm going to say File. I'm going to Save As. And here you have to do a few things different. This thing that says Text Document, you want to change that to All Files. And you want to change the file name to something. Let's call it index. Index is often the name of the default document, a folder in a folder. So we're going to change it to index and then type .html. Index.html. Okay. What this does is creates a file called index.html with this contents. This is the contents of that file. Okay. Now it doesn't really matter where you save this on disk. Maybe I'll just keep it in documents. I'm going to save it right there. You just have to make sure that says all files. That says index.html, and you hit save. And now you have created an HTML page. You can view that by going to that location. So I went to Documents, Index, and saying Open with Google Chrome. So now I have it there. So I have my index.html note in Notepad right here, and I have the view of what it's showing on a web browser off to the right. Here it is on the left. Here it is on the right. It's the same data. Now, if I change something, I can do the same thing as was on that other page. I could take away, isn't that, well, maybe I want to put a question mark there. So I put a question mark there. I could say File, Save, and I can refresh that page. And now, when I hit refresh, I've got a question mark over there. Okay? So changes that I make to my HTML page show up over here. Okay? All right. Now, I want to go over a few more tags. We're not going to go over a whole bunch of tags in this course. Okay, but we're gonna do a few things. The tags that are listed here, besides the body tag just shows where the body starts and ends. The tags that show up here are this H1 tag and the P tag. Now, these are specific types of information. H1 stands for heading 1. P stands for paragraph. Okay, there are heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5. And the only reason why you use those tags is for organization purposes. But there are two types of generic tags that just mean I want to put stuff on my page. I want to put something on my page, and I want to be able to reference that thing later. Okay? And those are called the div tag and the span tag. Put those here. And every tag you start it off and you end it with a slash. Okay. I'm actually going to put another tag underneath. This is I'm going to say this is a, whoops, I deleted the div. I'm going to say this is a div. This is another div. Paragraph. This is a paragraph. Okay. All right, I'm going to save this, file save. I'm going to refresh the page. Okay, now it says this is a div, this is a paragraph, this is another div. All right. Maybe I'll just make 2 of these span tags. Okay. All right. The reason why I did that is a span tag does not force a carriage return in between things on the page, whereas a div tag does. A div tag will stay by itself. So because this is a div tag, it is its own thing, and it forced a carriage return there. Whereas because these are span tags, even though they're on different lines in my HTML code, they're on the same line over here. Yeah? Okay? That's really the difference between a span tag and a div tag. I should say this is a span. This is another span. All right. So those are 2 different tags. Now, if you go through the tutorial, it introduces you to lots of other tags. There's tags for creating bulleted lists. Those are called UL tags. So, UL, and then an LI is the list item tag. Okay. You don't need to remember all these things because you can always look them up. Okay. How do I create a, in fact, I could do that right now. How do I create a bulleted list in HTML? And it would tell me. I can probably even copy this, paste that in there, and now I hit save, and I have the ability to pop that up there. Okay. So if you for some reason wanted to put an ordered list on your web page, on your web map, that's how to do it. An unordered list. An ordered list is the same. It just puts 1, 2, and 3 instead of ... Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. Now there are what we call what you see is what you get editors for HTML pages. And when you go to create your own web maps in the future, you can do that because they might make it easier for you to make a pretty web page. But we're focusing on functionality in this course. So I want you guys to get familiar with how an HTML page works. Again, we're not going to make fancy pages, but you're going to be tinkering with the individual things yourself because you're going to see once we get into the JavaScript part how, like, if I wanted to add items to this ordered list, I could do that. Whereas if I did it through what you see, what you get, it would be confusing because there's so many elements on the page that I wouldn't know one thing from another. Right? So that's another tag. The only other tag that I'm going to show you today, and these really you probably could get along with all of these tags, is the image tag. The image tag will allow you to put an image on a page. Okay. Actually, there's one more tag, sorry. But the image tag looks like this. It has an attribute. Tags can have attributes. We haven't shown any so far, but tags can have attributes. And the way you show the attributes is you say the attribute name, which in this case is going to be src, and then you say equals, and then the attribute has to be in quotes. Okay. And then image tags don't have to be closed. They just need a slash at the end, which closes them, okay, because an image stands alone. All right, so here what I'm saying is this is an image. What's the source? Well, this is the source. The source is where that image is located. The image has to already be on the internet in order for it to work, okay? So in here, I have to type out the location of an image. So let's say I like cats. I'm gonna type in. I don't know. Not even, people don't like do puppies as much, right? So it's a cute puppy. Oh, that one looks pretty cute. So I'm gonna view the image. This is the URL to this cute puppy. So if I copy the URL to this cute puppy and I paste it in the source, okay? So it's a pretty long URL, okay? But I'm pasting that into the source. Now when I hit save, I refresh my page here, I've got the cute puppy at the bottom of my page. So I've created a pretty scattered page. Not organized at all. It's got some divs, it's got some spans, it's got this ordered list, and it's got a cute puppy at the bottom. Okay. Now, there's two ways to express the source for an image. One is to use what this is called absolute path. Another one, see if my picture comes up when I search for George Raver. Okay, so here's me back close to when I first got hired at USM. I wasn't as large, and that's a pretty bad picture. There's a different picture. I guess we'll just use this one. This one wasn't too long ago. Okay, let's say I want to put that on the page, but I don't want to use this URL. Well, I could actually save that data. Now the image has to be saved into the same folder or a subfolder of where I have the HTML file. Okay, so the HTML file and this file need to be buddies in the same directory, or there needs to go down from a directory. So I could do something like this. Go into Documents. Remember, that's where I saved my HTML file. And I could call this george.jpg. Okay. And if I put it in the exact same folder, I'm going to put this above my other image. Then I can change this. Instead of being puppy, I can just write george.jpg. George is my name. All right. So now I can refresh this page, and george.jpg shows up there. See, this isn't a URL for an HTTP site that exists out there. This is in the same exact directory. Okay. The same kind of concept will be important next week when we start trying to load CSV data or other GIS data. The GIS data will have to be in the same directory, okay, or a directory below. So I could. Sometimes people do this, like if they have lots of images, they'll create a folder and call it images. And I'm actually going to put George inside of images. If I do that, now I refresh, no more George, okay? Why? Why did George disappear? Well, I moved the location of George on disk down one level. I put it in a folder called images. All I need to do is modify that so that it says images/George, refresh, now I'm back, okay? When I say it has to be in a subfolder, technically it doesn't have to be, but it gets complicated if you start going up and down folders, because you put ... which means go up. So you could say ... /... which means go up 2 directories, and then you could go down a few directories. I don't recommend that, okay? So you have a master HTML page for your website, and then everything else should be subfolders inside of that HTML page. That's best practices like that, okay? But These are considered resources. This resource is located in the same directory. This is an external resource that's located in another place. When we start using geographic data, your resources are going to be located both here, and then some of your resources, like your map services, will be located on other machines. So these are two resources, two examples of two different resources. This one is a relative URL. This one's an absolute URL, in other words. That's its location on the internet. Okay, this one will only work if it's in the same directory as the HTML page. All right. The last one here that I want to show you is called an anchor tag. An anchor tag is a hyperlink. Hyperlinks also have attributes. So my hyperlink tag is going to have an attribute. I'm going to make that my university web page. So here is the information to get to my web page, and here is the hyperlink. So I've got my ahref equals, here's the URL to this web page, and I've got to close this anchor tag, because anchor tags do need to be closed. It's very important that anchor tags are closed, because what we're doing there is saying everything inside of this anchor tag now becomes a hyperlink. So I save it and refresh it, and now you'll notice when I hover over George and I click George, it will then take me to the page because I made it an anchor tag. So an anchor tag allows us to create a hyperlink. There are other attributes that let you, like, have you ever clicked on a hyperlink and it opened in a different window? Okay, there are other attributes that let you change that. So that's called the target attribute. So if I say target equals blank, that's just kind of, you don't have to write underscore blank. That's just kind of the standard way to do it, which means I want it to be a new one. Okay, then it opens it as a separate tab. See that? It opened it as a separate tab. I could write anything. I could write, Bill there. That's not necessary. The writing a blank is just kind of the standard way to say, oh, I want the target to be a new one. Okay. Once you call it something, though, then it gets a name, and it gets that name associated with it. Okay, so that's setting up anchors, ordered lists, devs, span, images. Now, all the tags that we've talked about so far, except for images, you can put tags inside of tags. So we can have our div, but we could put a span in the middle of our div. Okay. So we've got a span inside of a div. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, that's totally possible. There may be a reason for that. Okay, we might want to dynamically, like, let's say we've got some things that say something like you are in, this might say, and so why would I do this? Well, for some reason, later when we start doing JavaScript, I may want to change just this word so that it will update and say what their location is, or you clicked in a certain place. And so I may want to be able to refer to this element separately, because once something is an element, I can refer to it in JavaScript. Okay? I can only refer to elements. All JavaScript does is allow me to, allows me to do basic programming operations like adding things, subtracting things, dividing things, sorting through things, looping through things, but it also allows me to access the elements on the page. Okay? All right, and that's mainly what we're going to use it for accessing the elements on the page, or for creating new elements. You can actually use JavaScript for creating new elements on the page. or anywhere. Okay, so in order to make that next step, we're going to talk about two attributes that every element, what's an element? An element is like a div or span or a list. Every element can have these two attributes. And when we're programming with JavaScript, we need to have lots of our elements have these attributes. One of them, and I'll go ahead and make this span thing here. One of them is the ID. So we can give our elements unique IDs. So we can call this country. Okay. So now I've called this span country. Okay. And right now there's really nothing so far. There's nothing. There's no reason why I gave it that. But I'm telling you, in the future, we're going to say, okay, find the span with ID country and change the HTML, change the text to be something else. Okay. The other one is the class. The class allows us to add styling. So I'm gonna call this class bold, or maybe that's. I'll call it. Well, I can call it whatever I want. The class is just a label. I'll call it. Yeah, I'll call it. Call it bold. I don't want to use some word though that gets used all the time. I'll just call it heavy. Okay, now you may be saying, hey, you used a single quote here and a double quote here. I just wanted to drive home the point that single quotes and double quotes can be used interchangeably. You don't have to have, well, yeah, they could be used interchangeably. You don't have to use one or the other, but single quotes only, single quote, if a quote is opened with a single quote, it has to be closed with a single quote. If it's opened with a double quote, it has to be closed with a double quote. Okay, so like this would produce some error. I don't know what it's going to do. Okay, look, it just totally left out the top part. Okay, but this double quote is going to work. Okay. All right. Now, if I look at my developer tools, I can see the elements here. I've got my head, my body. I've got some divs. Inside of this div, I can see this span. So I've got all my information there. Okay. I'm gonna close this up because it's busy. All right. So before we get to the JavaScript, which is the main take-home, I want to briefly cover the fact that we can use what's called CSS to style things. In other words, if I want the word Mexico to be a little bit bolder and a little bit bigger, I can do that. And I do that through CSS. So CSS is W3C schools. CSS is a way to modify the way things look. I can apply CSS to, well, let's say 3 different things. I can apply them per tag. So in other words, if I just write out the name of a tag and I put my styles inside, it's going to apply to any tags that any of those tag types. So here it will make the background color of the body light blue. It'll make all H1s white and align them to the center. It'll make all paragraphs font family Veranda and font size 20. I'm going to copy and paste this into a new file real quick. So go File, New, and paste it. I'm going to do the same thing where I say File, Save As, and this is my same place, Documents. Remember, I have to change this to all files. And I'm going to call this, I'll just call this main.css. Maybe just index so we can keep it consistent. Index.css. Make sure this says all files. Okay. Save that. All right. So now I've got too many windows open, but Did I close my other one? Oh, no, there it is. Maybe I accidentally closed my other one. I don't know how I closed it, but I did. Maybe I copied and pasted over it or something. So I've got my CSS over here and my HTML over here, but I need to connect those two. Because if I don't connect them, they won't read, they won't know that this CSS applies to this HTML page. And I do that actually up in the header portion. Okay. So that has to look like this. And it's inside the header. And I paste that in there. This is the resource. Now, I've called mine index, so I'm going to change it. All right. The rest of this stuff always looks the same. It's saying, okay, it's a style sheet, it's a CSS style sheet, and it's this is the name of the resource. So now this CSS could be on a totally different computer, just like this resource is in a totally different computer. It could be, but I recommend you keep your CSS files together. Okay. All right. So now I've got too many windows open, but if I go back over here and I refresh this page, see what happened? I don't have any more H1s or paragraphs on in my CSS, but I do have a body tag. So it made the background this pleasing light blue color. Okay. All right. So now, what if I want to, instead of making paragraphs, let's make all the divs have that. So I changed P to div and saved it. Now if I go back over to here, refresh, see how it made all the divs look like that? Okay. All right. Now I mentioned that there are 3 different things that we can put into our CSS files. Those are tag types, which are what these are. If we put a dot before it, it'll apply to everything that has a class named this. So I could change dot heavy, and I could say, we're not going to go over all the different styles. You have to you have to Google, say, okay, I want to make it bolder. But I'll go ahead and tell you, font weight, bold, is how you change the font weight. Okay, so now if I have the dot heavy here, it's going to look, and everything that is of class heavy is going to get this. It's font weight bold. So now Mexico is bold. Okay, because I said font weight bold. Okay. Right? Now the last one is a hashtag. If I say hashtag, I'm referring to an ID. So anything that has an ID country, and IDs have to be unique. So there's only ever one of the thing on the page. So country, I could make that say color, change that to red. So now I have that says Mexico. Okay. So these apply to tags, these apply to classes, and the hashtags apply to countries. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get totally into CSS. Again, I've already said the reasons, but the concept of CSS does get much more complicated, but you don't need to know that for this class. But for example, one thing that I could do is change this. Well, I could do this. And what this does, okay, so I've got my divs, right? And I'm going to say, I'm going to do this. So this says, anytime there's a heavy class inside of a div, do this. And I could say, I don't know, This will make it look like a maybe. Let's see if this works. I don't need, I'm just trying to be crazy. It didn't work. Let's just try to say font font size 50 pixels. Okay. So I didn't even know what that other tag did, but what I'm saying here is now if it's heavy inside of a div, it's going to have this. So for example, if I change this to also be heavy, class equals heavy. This is heavy, but it's not inside of a div. Okay. So what's it going to do? How's it going to look? How's the word coffee going to look? It's inside of. Is it inside of a div? What type of element is it inside of? Yeah, it's inside that list item. That's what li means. Okay, and so it's not going to get this style, but it is going to get this style because this style just says any heavy element. So it's going to be bold, and it's going to get this style up here. Okay, but it's also not going to get country because country is the hashtag. So basically, it's going to just become bold. So if I go back to the web page, refresh. Oops, forgot to save. Refresh. Class equals heavy. Should be bold. Let's look, inspect it. See, look, it's not updating because it doesn't have that class there. Oh, this is the page I forgot to save. So see how I looked. See where it says list item right here? That didn't look like that. That's what I was checking on. See how this says class equals heavy? It didn't appear here. And so that's why it wasn't happening because I forgot to save that page. Now if I refresh this page, now coffee's bold and that appears here. Okay. So that was because I forgot to save before I refreshed. And you'll notice, when we go throughout this course, that sometimes you'll see things like that happen. I mean, when you're doing something, sometimes you can bang your head against the wall for a little while before you figure out, oh, that's why it happened. Okay, but don't bang your head against the wall too long. Okay, when you're creating web pages in this course, one of the things we should have done was put this in its own folder. But let's say I wanted some help on this. I could take my index file, my images file, and my index CSS file, and right-click and say send to compressed zip folder. And then I could email this file to my instructor, it's me, email it to me and say, hey, I think this should be making this element do this or this element do that, but it's not working. Can you help me figure out why? Then I can open up that file in my folder and I can do the same thing, look at it, and try to identify the issue. Okay, so that's what you need. That's one way to get help. Okay, so there's that. So that's really all I'm going to do with CSS. But CSS does come in handy, and you'll use it, but again, it won't be the focus of this course. All right, so the very last thing that I want to talk about, we've talked about HTML and CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheets, by the way. So that's what the cascading part of it is this. So this is heavy, class heavy inside of a div, and that's what it means, cascading. Okay, the very last thing is what if I want to do something based on a user action or something else? Well, that's where JavaScript comes into play. JavaScript allows us to call upon things on the page and modify them. So what I want to do here, the example I'm going to show is we're going to let the user click on, we'll change these 3 list items to be different countries, okay? And when the user clicks on one of the countries, it's going to say you are in, and it's going to put that country name here. So I'm going to change this from coffee, tea, and milk to USA, Canada. We'll make the last one Mexico. But you can click on one of those. All right. I'll leave the class there just for fun. We need to create one more new document. I'm going to go ahead and close the CSS because we're not going to change that anymore. Okay. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. To reopen that. Open with Chrome, and then I meant to close the CSS file. Did I do? I guess I did it already. And so now we're gonna have a JavaScript file over here. Okay. To start off our JavaScript file, I'm going to go to, again, and I suggest that you go through these tutorials, in depth. You have to go all the way from the beginning to the end, but get yourself familiar with them. Okay, so this little guy, when you click on it, it puts the date and time right there. Okay. So this is an example of a little bit of JavaScript. Okay. So we're going to do something very similar. Our JavaScript is going to be, actually today, let's do something almost exactly like this. I'm going to close this up. We're going to put our JavaScript all inside of this file rather than having an external file. Next week, we'll get into external JavaScript file. So ours is going to be a lot like this. So we're going to, when we click on any one of these names, we're going to have something happen. Okay. So that's what this means, this on click. On click means when the user clicks this element, do this thing. So what I'm going to do here is just, I cut it. I didn't mean to cut it, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to cut that and put it inside of this text. It looks like I need to delete that. Okay, so now this says on click document.getElementById demo.innerHTML equals date. Okay, so what this is doing is saying, okay, there's an object called the document. Okay, many times you're going to be referencing things by using this document object. Document object contains, what do you think the document contains? It's an HTML document. What do we talk about in HTML? What is the basic unit of things in the HTML document? It's made up of, yeah, what are those things? Elements. Right. So the document contains elements. So this says document, and this is a function that says get an element by ID. So what it's doing is saying, okay, I want the document, which you always have access to. I want to get an element by ID, and then the name of the ID that I want is called demo. And I want to change the inner HTML, and it's going to change it to the date. So we're going to modify this slightly so that it does what we want it to do. Okay, and then we'll build on this a little bit more next week. But here, this already does what we want it to do, except for it's changing it to be the date. What do we want it to do? When I click on USA, what do I want it to do? What did I say I wanted it to do? I want to change this word from Mexico to USA. Okay? All right. Now, what's the ID of this element, this Mexico element? Country. Okay? So I can go change this word demo to country. Got to spell it right. Got to spell it. I'm just going to copy and paste it. That way I don't fat finger. Okay. I'm going to paste it down here. So what I'm doing here is saying, okay, go to the document. Now I'm going to get the element by ID. I'm going to get the country element, and I'm going to change one of its attributes. This right here is actually an attribute, although you don't see it. That attribute is called inner HTML. I could change other attributes. I could actually change the class if I wanted to. If I wanted to change the class to be different, I could, and that the word would appear in a different color. Okay, if that's what I change the class to. But here I want to change this attribute, which is the inner HTML attribute. And so instead of date, I want it to show up as USA. I'm gonna put USA here, but I'm not quite done. Okay, USA is a special thing. It actually needs to be in quotes. Good thing is I can use quotes inside of quotes, as you've already actually seen right here. Okay, because I want to tell the computer that this is a separate variable, I have to put this guy in little quotes too. Okay. All right, so what I'm doing is saying, okay, find the element country, change the inner HTML to USA. So if I hit File, Save, did I close? No, I put it right there. Now I hit Refresh. And if I hover over the letters USA and I click on it, and it changed that to USA. Okay, that's what it did. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is, as an assignment, and I guess I don't have any way to collect this, but I want you to take this right here and modify it and put it where it needs to go in order for you to be able to click on Canada and Mexico, and then have it say you are in Canada, you are in Mexico. Okay. Obviously, your picture, you can just get rid of the picture of me. In fact, I'll just do that right now. Now you got a cute dog, and I want you to be able to click on Canada and Mexico, and for it to say Canada and Mexico. All right. It's getting close to 8. We can go ahead and stop here. If you want to just do this right now, because it's not that hard, you can and show it to me, or you could do it later. Okay. But what you're going to do is take this, put it in the right place, change the USA to something else, and finish it off. Next week, we'll cover. We can put our JavaScript in a separate file. Okay. But sometimes that just makes it more complicated, depending on what we're doing, and so we'll really get into this. I think it'll build on it better if we cover that part next week. So we've introduced JavaScript. So your assignments are do the 2 formal assignments, then finish this and go through these W3C schools for JavaScript and for CSS. Actually, you don't need to do much of the CSS one. Just kind of look through it, see if there's anything else interesting in there. But go through it for HTML and JavaScript in preparation for next week. All right, anybody have any questions about that? That's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this file right here and hit save, and I am going to go on to Blackboard, and I'm make this big again. And I'm going to edit. And I'm going to upload that last file. So say browse my computer, documents, and I'm actually going to upload index HTML and index CSS. Because if you didn't have the CSS, it wouldn't show up in the colors. Okay. So then I'll hit submit. See if it lets me do that. Yes. Okay. So now you can download those files. As long as they're in the same directory, they'll work. I deleted the picture of myself, so you don't need the images folder. But you can access those files. All right. All right. Anybody have any questions? Anybody other questions? That was a great thing to remind me to do. I was going to do it, but okay. So I will go ahead and stop.